Hey, so I wanted to quickly talk about a book by Annaka Harris, which was recommended to me by Patrick Alf. So, big thanks for the recommendation. Her book is called Consciousness, Brief Guide into One of the Big Mysteries, or something like this. It's a really interesting book because I work in a neuroscience department where one of the lines of inquiries for us is to try and understand where in the brain consciousness may be, like conscious thought may be processed. But she starts from a different perspective, which is the idea of panpsychism, that there's one big form of consciousness which may or may not align with what we experience as humans. Consciousness basically being like that there is something in an organism that makes that organism, or like to that organism, that makes that organism feel, think something, that it is that organism, right? So just as an example, some really great mysteries. For example, I was just cycling back home, navigating the crazy traffic here in Rio, and I'm cycling, so I'm seeing potholes ahead. I need to balance the bike as I'm navigating those potholes, and I may hear, for example, a motorbike honking behind me, right? So all this information arrives at different points in time, travels at different speeds up and down my body, because I now have to regulate my muscles in order to stay balanced, avoid one pothole, also the motorbike behind me. So all this information, like sound of light travels faster than sound, for example. The information from my ears about balancing, and the information that I have from my muscles about where I am relative to other cars, etc., to the bike, the pedal of the bike, and so on. All this information arrives at different moments in my brain. Yet I experience all of this as if it happens now. And when I decide to brake based on, for example, somebody honking, and swerve to avoid a pothole, I feel like I make the conscious decision, but actually the experience of that is already about something that happened in the past, but I'm experiencing it now. And it is also it's a question of timing. People sometimes, or physicists often, talk about matter is one of the biggest mysteries in physics. But if you think about it, matter is something we only know about through conscious experience. Because, for example, I'm sitting on my bike and cycling through a material world, but the only representation that I have is my conscious experience of interacting with that. So I can touch my bike here and feel it, the steel is kind of cold, even though it's a relatively hot day. And so I can know something about the physical or the chemical composition of steel, but the experience of it is something that only I have consciously. And it raises some really interesting questions, about to some extent similar to quantum mechanics and other big questions in physics. At what moment, does the light go on, right? So if we just think about it, at some stage in my past, I was two cells that merge, right? And then, they start dividing. At what moment did I start experiencing the world in some way that would allow us to say that I've been conscious, right? So there's some really, really interesting questions. And I have to say, the book it's really brief read, really interesting, fascinating read. It has opened a different perspective on a couple of questions that I've been dealing with work-wise, in terms of trying to make sense of motivation and emotional experiences. How can we actually study them psychologically? And so, you know, like it's been really an eye-opener reading this book and thinking through some of the questions that she poses. You know, like the cool thing about the book is it asks questions and poses the questions, provides some evidence, some experimental evidence that there is something that needs to be looked into in order to really start understanding better what it is to be conscious. And so, yeah, highly recommend Annaka Harris Consciousness. It's a fantastic book, asks some big questions, makes you think, and I think that is the great thing about a book, it makes you think. Thanks a lot, and yeah, I'll hope to maybe talk about some more inspirations drawing from that book, you know, like trying to apply some of the questions that she poses to some of the work that we're doing, focusing on values, on health and well-being. All right, thanks a lot, guys.